Everyone, how y'all doing today on this Saturday? Hope you're doing well. I'm excited to be here with you on this Saturday. And my name is Gene Rice, and I am hosting a forum which is generally going to be discussed one way in this particular segment, but this segment is designed to present some material to you as it relates to what's the bottom line. What's the bottom line as it relates to academic performance? And what we want to provide in this segment or in the totality of this lesson are strategies that will increase academic performance. But in this lesson, we want to focus on understanding a little bit better the bottom line. We use this term a lot. It's associated across different spaces, different efforts that people are involved in. Even in our everyday conversation, you will hear from time to time the term or the word bottom line. I believe, as I stated once before, that if we're really going to understand our students, understand how best to reach them, serve them as it relates to their education experience, it's prudent on our part to understand what is each individual student's bottom line. All right. Knowing what their bottom line is key. All right. So I want to just take a moment, welcome you in. Thanks for joining. Thanks for taking the time. And this particular broadcast, I think, is going to be insightful. I'm excited to share this with you. My name is Gene Rice once again, and I'm ready to get started. All right. So the first thing we want to do right off the top, we want to start with some definitions with bottom line. All right. Stay with me. I'm going to do this for about 3 minutes. So I'm going to give you some information for about 3 minutes, and then we will start our conversation. Based on Merriam-Webster's dictionary, bottom line is the underlying or ultimate outcome or criterion. All right. It is the underlying or ultimate outcome or criterion. When we start talking about balance sheets in a business, it's calculated by deducting expenses from revenues. So revenues generated from sales minus the expenses that it takes to run that business gives you what we call a net, either a net profit or a net loss or break even. But that is the bottom line once you deduct expenses from revenues on a balance sheet. All right, which feeds into the next definition. A bottom line tends to be pragmatic and realistic, meaning if you just look at the top line, which is the revenue line, you would say, man, this business is doing very well. All right, you look at the gross sales. Let's just use an example. A business is making $1 million. You'd be like, man, this business is really doing fantastic. But in order to get a more realistic picture, you have to now go to the expenses. What are the expenses of this particular business? Now, if that business has expenses that exceeds $1 million, well, it's going to render that business a net loss. And once you start looking at that pragmatic and realistic line, now it gives you a more realistic picture of exactly the condition of that particular business. All right. But in the inverse of that is also true. So if you have a business that is $1 million, but their expenses are $400,000, it's a net gain. All right. And we would say that that business is healthy and has a healthy business model. All right, a few more definitions. When we start talking about bottom line, it is the final result or outcome. All right. And then it's also the most important part of something or the most important part to consider. And we gave just a brief example of what that means whenever you start looking at a balance sheet of a business. All right. So I want to inject something right here. Let's look at the opposite of bottom line. So if bottom line is something, is the most important thing for us to consider. It is pragmatic. It gives us a realistic picture of what's going on in a particular organization or business. Then let's look at the opposite of that. The opposite of a bottom line is something that's inessential. It's non-essential and secondary. About to say bottom line. Bottom line is it's not important. It's not relevant. We don't consider it as being valuable. All right. So the opposite of a bottom line is I don't care. I'm not looking at that. It's not worth considering. All right. So just to throw a little contrast in there right off the top. Bottom line, it is taking the top value that has been generated within an organization. In this particular instance, we're using something very tangible in terms of sales, revenue within a business, but it also looks at the expenses, what it takes to generate that value, to bring about those sales and revenue. And then whatever that number is that sits on that bottom line underneath gives us a realistic picture of how well something is doing. All right. And that tells us that the methods, the activities, the decisions, and our whole thinking process and application, it gives us a picture, a direct feedback in terms of how well we're doing in a particular area. All right. So I want to give you just a few more definitions from different perspectives, and then we're going to move into the next segment. Bottom line indicator. All right. Bottom line indicator. It is important. It is an important indicator of overall conditions in the company's target market. So now we're talking about we've expanded beyond just the simple internal workings within a business. And all this, trust me, all this, I'm building a model, and we're going to pivot in a little bit, and it's going to relate to academic performance. But I want to give you some examples, real world examples, before we do that. Again, back to bottom line indicator. It is an important indicator of overall conditions in the company's target market. So again, we're moving from an internal look. Now we're starting to look at the company's position as it relates to external markets. All right. It is also a barometer of management's effectiveness in selecting strategies, investing in products and services, marketing, and cost control. So now, again, we're no longer just looking at the numbers within, but now we're starting to look and expand upon the decision-making of management, the strategies that have been developed and are employed within the marketplace. We're also looking at the marketplace response to those strategies and the positioning of those products and services in the marketplace. And all those things, those external relationships and interactions feeds into the top line, which is the revenue that's generated. It starts to paint a picture of just how valuable those goods and services are within a given market. All right. Now the question is, how much did it take to generate that value? And that's going to give us a picture of the level of accuracy. And it's going to give us a picture of the relevance and the connection that that company has to the market. So the greater understanding that's generated by management in terms of what the market is looking for, and the market consists of buyers, all right, then it's going to give a picture of how tight or how wide their thinking is. And so when you start thinking about targeting in terms of, you're shooting a pistol and you're doing it for some type of sport, You want to get center mass. And so when management is making decisions about their products, about their services, they want to get as close to center mass as possible with their client, their customer. All right. It's starting to formulate a little bit. Some of you may start to see the picture formulating, but just giving a business look is setting a template, an example for us. All right, that was bottom line indicator. Bottom line indicator expanded beyond the internal workings of the company and started to look at that company's position in the marketplace and how it feeds into those numbers that exist within a company. All right, now here's the last thing I'm going to discuss in terms of setting the foundation for bottom line. The next term we're going to look at is bottom line thinking. Bottom line thinking. All right. Bottom line thinking makes it possible for you to measure outcomes more quickly and easily. All right. Bottom line thinking, meaning when you start to think about how well a company is performing, how well certain things are being produced, how well those goods and services are getting to the customer, how well those customers are responding to those goods and services are being presented. Bottom line thinking makes it possible for one to understand or to measure outcomes and measure outcomes more quickly and easily. All right. It allows you to measure because it's giving you an exact number. It's giving you a measurement, something that says how well or how poorly, or you're just holding in place. All right. Bottom line thinking. It's a way of approaching how you think about how well something is doing. All right. So now let's talk a little bit. And then once we talk a little bit, we're going to move into the next segment. Now, when you're interacting with someone and you want to know that realistic, that pragmatic picture of what's going on, you want that person to be as honest and as open with you as possible. But here's what generally happens. Generally what happens is that there's a tendency to talk about the top line. You know, look at all of the good things that are being generated. Look at all of the progress that is being made. Look at the level of reach that we have in a particular space. Look at the quantity of what's coming in. All right. And when you start talking to, all right, let's break it down. I'm gonna go ahead and dab into the student arena. When you're talking to your student and you ask them, how are you doing in school? Most kids are going to start with their top line. They're going to tell you, hey, they're going to start out with the good stuff. Hey, I made X. I made an A in this. I made a B in that. And then once they get finished giving you all of the good stuff, what is it that an inquisitive parent wants to know? Well, you left out something. I thought you had 4 or 5 classes, but you only told me about 3. All right. So that starts to get your mind churning a little bit now to say, all right, you've given me all the good stuff, but those numbers don't add up. All right. You've given me 3 out of 5 classes. Let's talk about those other 2 that you forgot to tell me about. And so once you start looking at those other 2, generally, those other 2 are not as well. It could be a C. It all depends on what a person's bottom line is. Maybe some people's bottom line is a C. Maybe some people's bottom line is a B. And others, it may be a D or a F. And then hopefully this is not the case where you don't have a bottom line at all. It's inessential, non-essential. You don't care. All right. So hopefully it doesn't fit into that category. All right. But the point is, you have to be mindful of people who want to just feed you their top line. All right. You also want to look at those other areas that are not being discussed, those other areas that are not being mentioned. That is a key point in our discussion today. Is yes, we acknowledge, we celebrate all of the positive gains, all of the progress that is being made in our educational experience. But it is also important that we start questioning those things that are not being discussed, those things that are not being identified. All right? Because taking the example of the student, if we just continue to focus on one segment without looking at the other segment, that segment, if left unattended to, unaddressed, could eventually start to have an effect on those things that are going well. Because whatever is being fed the most, whatever is being attended to the most is going to create dominance. And so you have this thing on both sides where a decision pretty much needs to be made. Either the positive aspects, the progressive aspects, if it's given more attention, if it's expanded upon, it could go over into those areas that are not performing as well. And now you have more dominance of progress. You have more dominance of increasing the overall academic, not just performance, but the overall academic experience as well. All right. But you cannot even begin that process until you start looking at the bottom line. All right. And in this particular example that we're resting upon right now, is that if we just continue to focus on the top line, we're going to miss a whole segment that could potentially have unintended consequences and effects on our overall experience and what we're trying to achieve here. All right. So we definitely want to explore those things that are detracting and taking away from our overall experience. All right. So again, if we was to put a title on that segment will be titled, Don't Just Tell Me Your Top Line. I also want to see all those other factors that you have omitted and failed to mention. All right. What do you think so far? All right. I have one more essential piece that I want to discuss with you before we move into some applications of our topic here today. All right. This one right here is a management idea. It is a management strategy. This management idea and this management strategy that I'm getting ready to share with you right now first originated with the Japanese. In particular, the management of Toyota. And these principles date all the way back to the 1980s. And a lot of these principles are relevant even to this day and time. Very insightful, and if they're studied and implemented, could create amazing results, not just from a business standpoint, but from an organizational standpoint. And it's not limited to just those type of groupings, but also within a family unit as well down to an individual person. just to look at these principles, these strategies could have direct benefits even down to the individual. All right. So the term that I want to introduce to you right now is called Gemba. All right. The spelling on that is Gemba. Gemba. It is a Japanese term meaning the actual place. Wow, look at that. Bottom line, Gemba is a Japanese term meaning the actual place. All right. Let's explore. Here's some examples out of this resource that I was looking at just to give you some descriptions of how they use the term Gemba. It says Japanese detectives call the crime scene Gemba, and Japanese TV reporters may refer to themselves as reporting from the Gemba. So in the first, detectives, Gemba, the actual place where it actually happened. Reporters report from the actual place. All right. So the emphasis is on the actual place. And when we start talking about the bottom line, if we want to understand how well something is doing, you go to the actual place. You don't go to the top line. You don't go to the things that are in the middle, nor do you just focus on the things that are those two things together, but you actually go to the bottom line in certain contexts. All right. And I want to say it that way because there are other contexts where you want to expand beyond the bottom line. But for our discussion and to keep it simple, we're focusing on, we're going to get a realistic picture, a pragmatic look by looking at the bottom line, the actual place. All right. Let's move a little bit further. In business, Gemba refers to the place where value is created. Think about that for a moment. Think about that and think about what we've already discussed as it relates to the bottom line. Bottom line gives us a picture of true value. All right? True or real value. Because value is not just the overall creation, but value is also those elements that it took to create that value and then what's left over. That is real value. And so in business, Gemba refers to the place where value is created because that number gives a reflection in terms of the overall process, the overall business model of a business, in terms of how well it is functioning, how well it is operating. All right. And so that's what that number in this limited instance gives us a picture. All right. So one more time, in business, Gemba refers to the place where value is created. In manufacturing, the Gemba is the factory floor. All right. For any of you who have worked in a factory before, and I did when I was a teenager, you know that there are different hierarchies within a manufacturing enterprise. You have the line people that are actually hustling and doing the muscle work and doing it's just work. All right. And then you move up and then you have like floor leads, and then you have like supervisors, and then you have like a floor manager, and then you have upper level, middle management, and upper level management, and all these different layers within that enterprise. But in this instance, it says that Gemba focuses on where value is created, which is at the factory floor. It is at the bottom line. It is at where the work is getting done. It's where value is being created. That's what Gemba focuses on, all right? Because all those other people up the ladder, their jobs lose purpose. It loses its value when value is lost at the bottom line, all right? So if value is lost at the bottom line, all those jobs up the hierarchy becomes irrelevant, okay? Think about that. All right, so three more things, and then we're going to talk about a real application of this lesson. All right. The Gemba walk, much like management by walking around, is an activity that takes management to the front lines, talking about to the floor again, to look for waste and opportunities for improvement. All right. They look for practical improvement at the lower level, or where work gets done, where value is created. All right. That's the Gemba walk. It's where management comes down and they go to the shop floor and they start identifying waste, and they also start to identify opportunities. And then they start reconciling those two. You start minimizing and eliminating waste, and you start seizing and expanding upon opportunities so that you're able to create greater value where the work is getting done. Okay? That's what Gemba allows. That's what that strategy promotes. Those principles promote. All right? Two more things. In quality management, Gemba means the manufacturing floor, and the idea is that if a problem occurs, the engineers must go there to understand the full impact of the problem, gathering data from all sources. Think about that. So they're basically saying if a problem exists on the floor, in this particular instance, the engineers, the architects that understand how the work is structured, different machines that facilitates work, all right, the technology that powers those machines and facilitates work. In order to rectify or deal with that problem, even the engineers must go down to the place where work is being created in order to bring about corrective actions, to fix the problem, all right, to get things working back normal and functioning once again, all right. They have to go all the way down to where the source of the problem exists. Last one, and then we're going to start bringing it home. This one focuses on, it says the idea, speaking of Gemba again, the idea is that to be, Gemba is customer driven. One must go to the customer's Gemba to understand his problems and opportunities using all one's senses to gather and process data. All right, that is almost a direct reflection of what we just discussed. So in order to understand your customers' needs and problems, one must go to where those problems and needs exist. And then it expands, it takes it just a little bit deeper. And it says that the person or the group that's going to take a look at these customers' needs and problems need to be able to employ all of their senses in order to gather information and really understand what the problems are and what the needs are. The person must go down to the customer level, the user level, and employ all of their senses in order to understand what the customer's needs and opportunities are. All right. Here's our first application. So we look at bottom line, and bottom line gives us a pragmatic and realistic view. It gives us true value, real value in terms of the health of a group, a business, organization, or even an individual and whatever it is that they're doing. We moved on to being mindful of people who want to just present to you their top line, but not understanding what the other factors are that exist that it takes to make and create that value, and then what remains afterwards. All right. I also want to put a pin in that, and I wanted to address it earlier, but I also want to, just for balance sake, don't necessarily judge a business just by what exists in the middle. All right. Sometimes, depending on what stage a business is in, it's expected that what it takes to generate value will exceed revenue. That is a normal function. That is a normal progression in business as well. So it doesn't mean that at certain points in times that the middle area, the expenses, the cost that it takes to create certain value is not going to exceed what you're bringing in. All right. You just cannot sustain that over long periods of time. But at certain points, when you're at the beginning of a business and it's in its infant stages, the costs could very well outweigh the revenues that are coming in. If your business is undergoing major changes and shifts and you're pivoting and you're moving in a direction, the costs to create that change and that pivot could very well exceed the revenue that's coming in. But you do that with the idea that these changes at this point is going to create greater value in the long run. All right. And so you have to be mindful and a little bit nuanced when you look at things like that. All right. And so we talked about looking at top line, the intermediate line, and then the bottom line. And now we just rounded it out talking about the different aspects of Gemba, the actual place. And we associated that with the bottom line, where value is created. And not only is value created there, but we can also get an understanding of different problems that may exist at the lower level, at the actual place. It also allows us to see opportunities as well. So we have to have a balanced look. We have to have a balanced view when we're looking at things. We're not just always looking at problems. We're not just always looking at opportunities, but we're looking at the totality of what is actually existing in any given place or moment. Now, how does this relate to academic performance? All right. I believe, my opinion, and based on these studies or these things that we've looked at today, that if we really want to raise a student's academic performance, we have to go and look at their bottom line. We have to go to the actual place. The actual place is where that student originates, which means at the home level, you have to be able to start addressing those things that exist within a home. All right. And then we expand a little bit further out. We have to address those things that exist within the student's environment. And then we expand beyond that. And then we start to say all the places that a student may physically go, we have to start taking all those things in consideration as well. All right. I also want to introduce to you that we're not only just looking at those physical and tangible considerations, but we're also looking at those intangible considerations as well. And technology has a lot to do with those intangible considerations, because technology brings experiences and exposure to our students that they don't have to leave the comforts of their home, but by way of cell phone or tablet or computer through the internet, they can experience the world far beyond any place that they will ever go in their life. And the way things are shaping up now is, I would almost venture to say that the intangible aspects are starting to have a greater impact than those things that actually exist in the physical environment. All right. For instance, my son loves Fortnite. He loves Fortnite. All right. And I have watched and observed that that game can be so intense that they completely black out and have no clue of what's going on in their environment. You can call him 4 or 5 times and he has no clue that you're calling his name until you almost are at a high pitch or you're almost in his face and you're ready to reach out and touch him. All right. But it's just an example of how the intangible influences and elements are now starting to have serious and severe impacts on our students, our children's experience. All right. Now, remember what we said about looking at top lines, the middle, the intermediate line, is that when we start omitting certain aspects, eventually something is going to give way. Either the positive, productive activities that we're doing, either those things are going to dominate the space, all right, and then start to minimize those things that we don't want, or the inverse of that is going to happen, where the less desired impacts, the unwanted results and performances are going to now start to have an impact on those things that are working to where it dominates. And if you think about a lot of our students' progressions in terms of moving from primary to secondary education, it shows where a lot of them at a lower level, they're engaged as much as possible, as much as their support is there for them to be engaged. All right. But then as they start to move up and progress in age, all right. And then you hear a lot of parents say, man, that boy, he just too much. I can't deal with him. He half grown already, like 9 years old. Or 10 years old, or she like a little lady or something like that, about 11 or 12 years old. All right. And so once a child or a student starts to sniff out that a parent is starting to lose their grip and their grasp and their ability to guide and influence that student, they start to assert more independence in how they think, more independence in how they behave and in what they do. All right. And guess what? That same behavior and mindset moves over into the learning space, into the educational setting. All right. And as a result, now you have this conflict that's going on. You have one side that's trying to declare more independence, but with probably the wrong information, probably non-effective behaviors and practices. All right. And then if that behavior dominates, what's going to happen to that student's bottom line? What's going to happen to that student's bottom line as it relates to in the context of academic work? All right. What is going to happen to that student's bottom line as it relates to academic results? And then what, based on that student's actions, what kind of impact is it going to have in terms of that student's academic achievement and attainment? All right. Because remember, just like it is in a business, the bottom line reflects back to thinking, preparation, development, production, delivery. All right. It gives that business, that company, direct feedback in terms of how well certain things are working together. And if you have the right pieces in place or not. All right. And so when we're talking about a student that has been affected by those unwanted influences, those unproductive influences, then the bottom line is going to reflect those choices, those decisions, and those practices. All right. So how is a parent, how does a school system, an educator impacts and influences those students that fall into that category? All right. And I'm painting a picture of that category because we know that there are also students that are in the middle as well, and also on the other end. But remember the analogy that we use. It's not always focusing on the good things, but if we want to improve the overall structure, if we want to improve the overall experience, all right, we have to look at those things that are not producing in the manner in which it should produce. And in this case, we're talking about students. I just want to take a pause right there. And I want to shift to this final piece. Do you remember a time when educators actually, and this is well, let me say this first, disclaimer. I am not saying this is just simply a reflection point. This is not to cast any type of shadow or anything like that on our educators in existence. This is just from a historical perspective, just an observation in a particular setting. All right. So reflecting back, so my parents, my dad and my mother, they were educated in a segregated school system. All right. And I remember conversations that came from my dad and mom that their teacher actually resided in the community in which they lived. All right. That had some type of impact because I remember clearly, not just my parents, but even uncles and aunties said that if something happened in school where a teacher had to discipline them in school, that now this is what they said, before they even got home, somehow, some way that teacher communicated to those parents what happened and what they had to address in school. And then I can very vividly, they say not only did they get discipline in school, but they also got discipline at home as well. All right. And then the parents' mindset there was that if somebody else had to discipline you, I'm going to discipline you just because they had to discipline you. Because they seen their kids' behavior and attitude and response as a direct reflection upon them. That's how they saw it. That's how they viewed it during that time frame. All right. And so there was like interested parties in terms of the development of that student. Again, focusing on the teacher, looking at it from that perspective, by that teacher being in that community and having some type of relationship with those parents, it did not allow a big escape in terms of a student being able to pull a fast one over on their parents, because the adults had already established direct communication. All right, let's look at some of the other benefits of an educator in that community. All right. oftentimes I remember instances where they say educators actually, they attended the same churches as some of their students. All right. So imagine that. Imagine that a modern day student walks in a classroom. And again, I am not trying to associate contemporary living today versus then. It's simply an observation, and we're to extract the principle from it. But imagine a student walks into a classroom and that teacher lives in their community. That teacher also knows the parents or guardians. All right. Just imagine the thought process of that student when they walk in that classroom. Imagine their thinking, imagine their approach in terms of what they will be able to do or not be able to do without someone calling it out and dealing with it and addressing it. Imagine what that student's level of focus is going to be as it relates to academic work. All right. And not only academic work, but even their approach to learning, which means they know they got to get their assignments complete. Not just complete and turn in any kind of way, but then they know they have to get it done well. All right. And then a teacher is also going to understand the potential that lies within a student as well, and know if they're giving their best or not. And then that student is also going to feel that challenge or that pressure to know that that teacher already knows that if they come in at a lower level, they're going to call them out, even if they are passing, even if they did make a B. If they have A student potential, then that teacher is basically going to call them out and say, well, what's going on here? All right. What types of things do we need to take a look at and understand? Because you want to address something early on in the process versus allowing it to develop and become something bigger. All right. We're just simply talking about the idea of when a teacher and parents and students are all networked and connected. All right. And then it creates that web of communication and accountability. All right. That gives it gives a tighter framework, a tighter structure in which that student is going to develop. All right. And whenever we start talking about, structure, framework, and how, we're talking about discipline. That's discipline. I think many of us have looked at discipline just from a physical activity that takes place. But discipline, real discipline, is something that you don't even have to do that. All right. Real discipline is being able to choose to operate in a structured way. Real discipline is being able to function in a particular way. And real discipline is actually committing oneself to a process, to a work. That's real discipline. All right. When you start talking about whooping or spanking, those are results of corrective actions, not necessarily discipline. All right. And so when we start tying all of this in together, all right, and then I'm going to start closing this right now. The teacher, when we start talking about that management layer, that teacher is somewhere in that intermediate chain of influencers in that child's education. And when a teacher, and again, this is just principle only, whenever the teacher or those that are creating the educational experience come down to where the bottom line exists, the actual place, now they're going to be able to see where the problems are and opportunities to deliver and frame an experience that's going to meet the needs of the customer, which is the student. All right. So I'm going to close my notes and just talk these last 3 minutes to you. We went through all of that material to say that even not just the students that are at the highest risk, which is what I gave a picture of, is pretty much a high risk student. All right. But we also want to look at our students that fall in the at risk or low risk category as well, because there are a lot of our students, they have the resources available to them. They have a network and support group in place, but then they lack the interest to pursue and to engage in the learning experience. And in order for us to effectively reach them, in order for us to effectively understand those gaps and those deficiencies, we have to go to their bottom line. We got to know what they value. It's the most important thing to them. What is the most important thing to someone who is 13, 14? What's the most important thing to someone who is 15, 16, or 17 or 18 years of age? We have to understand what is important so that we can start building an experience around them that's going to help them properly set the bottom line so that it is progressive, so that it is where gains are taking place. All right? That's what we're looking at. That's what we're looking at right here. All right? What do you think? What do you think? What I'm going to do moving forward is we're going to invite a combination of people. We're going to invite some students to come and express. Let them tell us what they think about their learning experience. And I'm quite sure there are a lot out there, they are actually loving school. They are doing well. They are hitting those marks. They are progressing. They're setting themselves up for success. All right. And then there are those, they're trying to figure it out. All right. Because I know just this year, my son's in the 7th grade. And just right off the top, one of the most impactful and influencing things that he's starting to contend with are the social circles that exist within a school system. Social circles. Who's popular? All right. Who's popular? How do they talk? How do they dress? What do they do? You know, just studying people who seems to get a lot of attention or draw a lot of attention. And they are leaders in their own right. All right. Call it what you want to, but if you have other people listening to you, following you, trying to be like you, you are a leader. All right. So they are natural leaders, charismatic, swag, or drippy, as they say nowadays. I still don't know what that means or how that came to be, but I'm quite sure I will be educated in the near future. But bottom line is, our students have to contend with a lot of things other than academics. And when we start the process of understanding all those different elements and factors out there, we can start to meet their need adequately. Now, if you go to my website, which I did not put it up there, so I'll put it up there now. All right, so we're offering a program. It's the 60-day Academic Excellence Program. And we now have the website up. It's still under construction, but we do have certain parts that are functional and ready to go to serve you. And so you can go to generice.com and you could read more about the 60-day Academic Excellence Program that we've designed. And you could also either enroll a student or sponsor a student. All right. A lot of these lessons that I'm doing on Facebook Live or sessions I'm doing on Facebook Live, it's designed, and I'll be honest with you, I still haven't gotten down to the real meat of what I hope to address or aim to address as it relates to understanding the learning environment. But these are more to paint a overall picture and start to add some understanding around the different variations that we see with our students in the school system, in the learning environment, things that I think we should be discussing, things I think we should be raising, because guess what? I think about this. Whenever I become 70 or 80, God willing, hopefully, I mean, I want the smartest, bright, thoughtful, considerate young adults that's handling the affairs as it pertains to government, society, church, I mean, business. You know, these are things that we have to think about. It's not just hitting academic goals, making a grade, but it is the overall experience that needs to be addressed. All right. And I can hear it now. Just going back to that bottom line, we just focusing on performance. If you made an A, great, good job. But there's more to the learning experience than just making a grade. You know, are they developing as human beings? You know, do they have compassion? Do they have? And I'm working even within my own parenting. I'm working on this now as well. So I'm not telling you I got it all figured out. I don't. All right. I'm still, even though we got what, 4 in the adult category now, with this different set, different generation, whole different ball game. All right. And so we're still learning how to parent still. All right. And we don't want to just say, get your grades. And I tell my son this all the time. Hey, don't just, get the grade, because that's the bottom line for the school. That's the bottom line of how the educational system works. But that is not the bottom line as it relates to your overall experience of development. All right. You need to understand how the world is operating as well. You need to understand how this educational experience fits into the larger context, you know, because when you get to a job, they don't care about if you made straight A's or not, or you had a 4.0 or not, if you're not able to think, you're not able to problem solve, you're not able to get work done, because when you move into those spaces, their major concern is the bottom line. Their major concern in the business world is the bottom line. All right. And that bottom line needs to speak profits. All right. Not just profits overall, but if you're talking about corporations, they're talking about profits for shareholders. All right. That's important. And sometimes when you have in those enterprises like that, hey, it is game on. They want people who can get the job done. All right. And so we want to educate our children. It's not just getting the grade, but you need to understand how the real world operates. What are the rules of the real world? And I can tell you now that the rules that they teach in school, where everybody's being considerate of each other, everybody's being thoughtful of each other, are not the rules that's taking place in the real world. In the real world is, and I'm not saying, I'm not promoting this, but it's either cut or be cut. All right. It's either perform or go home. All right. And that's just the bottom line in the real world. All right. So we want to teach them that they can be change agents, though. So we want them to know how to function. We want them to be civil. We want them to be thoughtful and compassionate. But then we also want them to be able to operate in the world as it exists, in the actual place. We don't want to paint a rosary picture for them, and the picture is not rosary. We want to tell them how work is being done on the shop floor. All right? We want them to know exactly how it's been done, how it's getting done, and exactly what it's going to take for them to be successful. Making the grades, that's part of the equation. But there are other factors that also must be considered. And finally, if we're truly wanting to address a student's performance, we have to go where their bottom line originates. And sometimes that's taking a picture and taking a look at what activities are taking place in their actual place, which is their home environment. All right. You can't go in and change their home environment. You can't do that. But what we can do is start to mitigate. All right. Mitigate those factors, mitigate those things that are taking place. Generate understanding, because if we have understanding, then we can apply different tools, different strategies that allows them to reach their full potential and be able to perform in the learning environment. All right. So thank y'all. Thank y'all for taking the time. Please visit the website, support us, get a student enrolled. 60 days from the start of their enrollment, I'm going to provide them videos. I'm going to provide them, depending on which package you're getting, they're going to have access to me regardless. But then depending on which package you get, we're going to have coaching sessions. And these strategies are going to be specifically focused and targeted on academic work. All right. So this right here, these are just motivational things that we're discussing and sharing, but we're going to actually look at different tools and strategies that will help them with their academic work. All right. So if you have more questions, please do not hesitate to reach out to us. Thank y'all for taking the time. I look forward to speaking with you again, and we're going to continue to dig a little bit deeper and explore some of these issues, because there's some things I really want to hit, and I need your help in order to be able to get to the right level on some of these discussions. So help us, join us, partner with us, and let's start having this dialogue. But until next time, have a great weekend and take care.